The next concept I want us to look is the concept of JSX, React JSX. And what is JSX? It stands for JavaScript XML. JavaScript XML. And what this does is that it allows us to write HTML elements within the JavaScript code. Alright. So if you come and look at our application here, this is our application. Let me close this. We have said that when you create a new React application, it will create one component called the app component by default. So it will give you one component by default, which is the app component with this default code here, which is already here with this default content. So it is upon you to change the content of this component, or even to add more components and design your website the way you desire. So when you look at this code, you will see that it has a mixture of HTML elements and JavaScript code. I don't know if you see that, because we have learned about functions. You can see here we are declaring a JavaScript function using the function keyword, then the function name, and then so this is a function. But within the function, you can see there are some HTML inside within this function. So this act of writing HTML together with JavaScript is what we are calling it the JSX, JavaScript XML. You see, if it was in a normal, if we are just developing a website using plain vanilla JavaScript without any framework like React, what would happen is that you would create a different file which has HTML, then you would create another file with JavaScript, and then maybe you would link those files. But since we are using a framework like React, React allows us to mix JavaScript code and HTML code like the way you are seeing here, and this is what we are calling it the JavaScript XML. So when we are using JavaScript XML or JSX, there are some syntax or rules which we normally use as opposed to when we are using plain HTML. Alright. So you can see that if it was a plain HTML, we have been adding comments. Let me just create one HTML file. So I'm going to open a new window. And I'm going to open the HTML file we created some times back. I think it's on desktop. Yeah, so I got this. Is this HTML file? Let me open it here. Yeah. So you can see that here we have these are a pure HTML, and then this one is a JavaScript XML. So there's some differences, slight difference or rules that we follow in when using JSX code, which are not in the HTML. One of those is when we are writing the comments. The way we write comments in HTML is a bit different than the way we write comments in a JSX code. So with HTML, you realize that when you want to add a comment, for example, let me say I want to add a comment here, you can use // So let me write some sentence here. This is HTML code, and I want to comment this line. I can highlight it, and then I comment it out by typing control question mark on my keyboard, and you can see this is how comments are added in HTML. Let me type the same sentence in JSX code and then comment it out. So when you come in JSX code, let me say I want to add some random sentence here and say this is JSX code, and I want to comment this out. Let me highlight it and then comment it out by typing control question mark. You can see that it's a bit different than when we are writing comments in pure HTML. So that is one difference. The other thing that is a bit different in HTML that is not there in JSX code is the way we write the class name. For example, in the HTML, we can create an element. Let's add one def element here and give it a class. How do we give an element a class in HTML? We type the word, the attribute class equals to, then we give the class name, maybe def1. So that's how we give an element a class in HTML. When it comes to JSX, the way we write classes is a bit different. So if maybe we have this element paragraph and we want to give it a class, we will not just type a class like this. So we'll use class name instead of just typing a class. So maybe class name, you can call it paragraph 1. Alright, so again, this is another slight difference between JSX and HTML. The other difference is in the way we write the enclosing of elements. So in HTML, you have the option of leaving the elements without a closing tag. For example, you can have a paragraph, or you can have a body without the closing tag. We can remove this closing tag body. So we have the body here, which is the opening tag, but there is no closing tag. This one is still correct in HTML. But in JSX, every element must have a corresponding closing tag. For example, this one is div, it has a corresponding closing tag here. This one is header, there must be a corresponding closing tag here. This one is a image, there must be a closing tag image. Header 1 must have a closing tag. So in short, all the HTML elements in JSX code must have a closing tag. Otherwise it will give you an error. When I remove this, for example, now you can see that, so I have an opening tag P, but I have not put the closing tag. It gives you an error. You can see there is one error up here, and when you put your mouse over here, it tells you that P has no corresponding closing tag. Right? So when you try to run this, it will give you an error below here. So you must add a closing tag to each HTML element in JSX code. Alright. The other thing that is slightly different is how we write the expressions. And what is an expression? An expression is maybe you are writing code to do some evaluation, or you are adding some numbers. So the way we write expressions in JSX is that we use the angle, not the angle, but the curly brackets. Alright, so we use the curly brackets in JSX to write the expressions. And then the next thing is when we are inserting a large block of code, or when we are inserting there's something called the top level. So I want to demonstrate these two concepts here in JSX. So I want to go to this component called the app component, which is generated by default when we create the React app, and I want to delete this code that is given to us by React. I want to remove this from right from dev here. Okay, up to here. All right, and within this code, so I have a function, I have a component. Component is basically like functions. We will look at that when we look at components. So we have this function called app, and it must return an HTML. So when we want to return an HTML, we must use these parentheses or these brackets, and then within that brackets we can now type any HTML element that we want to return. Maybe let us say we are just returning one header for now. All right, so we are returning an header and saying header 1. So when we save these changes, you can see that in our browser we are only having this header 1 displayed. Let us say now we want to add more content. Let us add more HTML elements. All right, so here let us add another, under header 1 we add paragraph. All right, and then we say this is we say welcome to our blogging post web app. So you see, once you put multiple HTML elements, like here we have header tag and here we have paragraph tag, it will give you an error. It will not allow you to return multiple HTML elements. So what components do, they only return one HTML element at a time. So if you want to write multiple HTML elements, what you have to do is you have to wrap them within one top level element. So what we can do here, we can create another top level. Let us create one div element, and within this div element we can now take all these elements and put them within one div element, so that at the end of the day this function called app will only return this div element, and then this div element will in turn return all the sub elements which are within it. Understand? So when you save this, now the program runs successfully, and you can be able to see the next element below the header element, and so that way you can be able to even add more and more elements as you wish. So you can even add more paragraphs, you can add images, okay, you can add links if you like, using the A tag, and you can add as many HTML elements just the same way you would have written the HTML code. So that is another rule in using JavaScript XML. So I want to pause here and give a question, give a room for question to ask. If you have any question, you can ask where you are not clear about the JSX before we go to the next topic of components. Any query? or Chari, any query?
Good to go.
All right. So let me pause this clip